hear ye, brave adventurers. The town of Bergraam, nestled amongst the foothills of the storied spine of the world, is in dire need of your aid. Our once peaceful lives have been shattered, series of violent earthquakes that threaten to reduce our homes and livelihoods to rubble. The ground beneath our feet trembles with unnatural fury, leaving fissures in its wake and threatening to swallow our homes whole. Buildings crumble, businesses lie in ruin, and fear grips the hearts of our stalwart people. The source of these tremors remains a mystery, a puzzle too complex for us simple folk to solve. We, the desperate people of Bergraam, call upon you, brave heroes, to answer our plea. We seek those with stout hearts, keen minds, and a thirst for adventure to investigate the source of these calamitous quakes. Could it be the wrath of a slumbering earth elemental, the stirrings of a forgotten god, or perhaps the machinations of some nefarious power hidden deep within the earth? We offer you challenge worthy of your talents, and a reward befitting your heroism. Glory, riches, and the eternal gratitude of the people of Bergraam await those who dare answer our call. Will you heed our plea and help us reclaim our peace? Come, heroes, join us in Bergraam. Time is of the essence, and the fate of our town hangs in the balance.
The air is thick with the smell of salt and seaweed as the Bergraam ferry chugs steadily across the open water. The sun hangs low on the horizon, painting the air in hues of orange and purple. You feel gentle rocking beneath your feet as the ferry cuts through the waves, leaving a frothy white trail in its wake. The ferry is crowded with a motley assortment of passengers, including merchants, pilgrims, and adventurers. You stand near the railing, gazing out at the vast expanse of water, lost in your own thoughts. In the distance, you can just make out the faint outline of Bergraam, bustling port city renowned for its trade and its somewhat lawless reputation. As you draw closer to the city, you see the silhouette of towering buildings and the flickering lights of countless torches and lanterns. The peace of the journey is shattered suddenly. Cacophony of croaks, splashes, and the thud of heavy objects striking the deck. From the shadows along the shoreline, a horde of bullywugs launch a surprise attack on the ferry. The creatures, their slimy green skin glistening in the fading light, leap onto the deck, wielding crude spears and clubs. Their eyes burn with a savage hunger, their mouths open in wide, menacing grins, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Panic erupts among the passengers as the bullywugs swarm over the ferry. Merchants scramble for cover, pilgrims scream in terror, and even seasoned adventurers are taken aback beside the ferocity of the assault. The ferry's crew, outnumbered and outmatched, fight bravely but are quickly overwhelmed. The bullywugs, driven by primal instinct to conquer and pillage, press their attack relentlessly. It's clear that unless something is done to stop them, the ferry, and everyone aboard, will be lost. Amidst the chaos and bloodshed, you see an opportunity to make a difference. This is your chance to prove your worth, to show what you are capable of.
Let me set the scene. Chaos on the ferry. Bullywugs swarming the deck. Passengers screaming. And there, at the ship's bow, a single figure stood, Kairos, Black Swan, Moran, the moonlight gleaming off the silver embroidery of his black leather coat. Right, he said, rolling his shoulders. Who's first? The bullywugs croaked and charged. Kairos' rapier flicked forward, a flash of silver in the dark, and the lead bullywug crumpled, clutching its throat. Kairos purred. You're going to have to try harder than that. A second bullywug lunged at him, jagged spear aimed for his chest. But Kairos laughed, that deep, infectious laugh of his, and spun low, ducking under the spear and driving his blade upward into the creature's ribs. Honestly, Kairos muttered, shaking his head. Amateurs. More bullywugs surged toward him. He grinned, flipping his rapier into a reverse grip. The deck beneath his feet was slick with water and blood, but Kairos moved like it was the polished dance floor. Time to get serious. But then, disaster struck. As bullywug shaman standing on the edge of the ferry began to cast a spell, dark energy crackling between its webbed hands. Kairos' eyes narrowed. Nope. Grabbing hold of a loose sail line, he swung over the bullywug shaman, his rapier flashing down in quicksilver arc. The bullywug shrieked as the spell fizzled out, and Chaos landed lightly behind it. For future reference, he whispered into its ear. No one likes party crasher. The legend of the Black Swan grows. And this is only the beginning. The fog was so thick you could barely see the rails. Bullywugs swarmed the deck, snapping jaws, slimy spears, and the wet thud of feet on wood, chaos incarnate. And in the center of it all stood the figure of impossible calm. A woman known only as Thalia, tall, slender, with glistening black hair that framed eyes like pools of starlight. A single silver astrolabe gleamed at her side, hanging from a chain. One bullywug roared and lunged toward one cowering passenger. The spear was already mid-air when Thalia simply raised a finger. The spear slowed unnaturally and then reversed, arcing backward as if the flow of time itself had been rewritten. It slammed into the creature's chest. Mind sliver, she whispered. A faint pulse of psychic energy rippled through the fog, and the closest bullywug clutched its head with a shriek. Its eyes turned black as ichor leaked from its nose. Another bullywug charged toward Thalia with guttural roar. Her eyes glowed faintly with celestial light as she extended a hand. The bullywug's strike halted mid-swing as time buckled around it. Enough! Thalia's hand turned palm up. The bullywug's body snapped backward as if pulled by an invisible tether. Tasha's mind whip, she cried. An ethereal glow spread from her chest and angelic light radiated from her back, and the time around the fairy seemed to slow. A surge of psychic energy lashed out in the form of thin silver strands, wrapping around the remaining bullywugs, who screamed as their minds fractured beneath the magical assault. The legend of the time-bending Aasimar of Bergraam begins. And this is only the beginning of her story. Bullywugs crawled over the railings, dragging passengers toward the edge. Spears flew. Shrieks echoed in the mist. And then, a glint of amber eyes in the dark. Zephyr moved like a shadow, slipping through the mist as though it were an old friend. F. Bullywug, standing over a trembling passenger, raised its spear for the kill. And then, flash! A blur of silver. The bullywug froze, confused, before its eyes rolled back, and it collapsed, Zephyr's rapier slipping from its side with barely a sound. Two more bullywugs lunged at him, but Zephyr's golden eyes narrowed. His feline muscles tensed as he activated feline agility, doubling his speed in an instant. He darted between the creatures, moving faster than the eye could track. His claws flashed out, raking across one bullywug's throat before he twisted, the hem of his dark cloak whipping through the air, and embedded dagger into the second creature's gut. The bullywug gasped, gurgled, and crumpled. Zephyr crouched, ears flicking toward the sound of heavy footfalls. A larger bullywug, their shaman, clutching a staff wreathed in sickly green light, was chanting an incantation. Poisonous mist curled toward the deck. Zephyr's whiskers twitched. His claws flexed. He vanished into the fog. The shaman snarled, looking around wildly, and that's when the mage hand appeared. His ghostly feline paw, flicking from thin air, swiped at the shaman's staff. The creature bellowed in rage, spinning toward the source, only for Zephyr to reappear at its back. His rapier gleamed in the moonlight as it slid beneath the creature's ribs. He straightened, licking the back of his hand as the last of the bullywugs sank into the depths. And with that, he vanished in thick mist clung to the water when, wham, a swarm of vile bullywugs leaped from the depths, their slimy forms glistening under the moonlight. Croaking war cries and waving their rusted spears, they swarmed the deck, causing chaos among the passengers and crew. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, she stepped forward. The fire genasi, her name still unknown to most, narrowed her glowing eyes, fiery red hair whipping in the wind. The bullywug snarled as she stepped toward the railing, heat radiating from her very skin. Enough, she growled, her voice like the crackle of burning embers. A barrage of spears shot toward her, but with a wave of her hand, she conjured a wall of flames, incinerating the projectiles mid-air. The temperature on deck soared as she shouted an incantation. Scorching ray! 3 blazing beams of fire shot from her fingertips, striking bullywugs left and right. They stumbled back, croaking in agony. The other bullywugs hesitated, but our hero wasn't finished. Summoning the primal magic in her blood, she clasped her hands together and unleashed burning hands in a wide arc. The deck hissed as the wooden planks blackened beneath the intense heat, and 3 more bullywugs collapsed into the water, smoke curling from their scorched backs. She's going to burn the whole ship, someone screamed. But no, even in her rage, she controlled the flame. With a flick of her wrist, the fire vanished from the deck, leaving only the smoldering remains of the fallen enemies. Bergraam's newest hero has arrived. The fairy was already in chaos when he emerged from the shadows. Impeccably dressed, deep crimson waistcoat, silk cravat, and that toffat perched at a rakish angle. His polished cane tapping lazily on the deck as if he were deciding where to sit for dinner. Well, Shala purred, eyes glowing faintly under the brim of his hat, and here was thinking this would be a quiet trip. A group of bullywugs snarled and charged toward him. Shala smiled and raised one gloved hand. Shadows burst from beneath his feet and black tendrils of void energy lashed out in every direction. When the energy receded, nothing but twitching husks remained. Shala sighed, adjusting his hat, messy but effective. The largest bullywug, easily 7 feet tall, judge crown of fish bones, roared and pointed rusted glaive toward him. Poisonous mist began to swirl around its hands. He flicked his cane toward the bullywug. The polished head of the staff glowed with infernal light as Shalas whispered, Eldritch Blast. 3 beams of crackling green force exploded from the cane. The first hit the bullywug square in the chest, the second struck its left arm. The third blasted its head, sending shards of bone skittering across the deck. The bullywug's injured arm began to rise, desperation in its wide, yellow eyes. Shala's eyes flashed. Suggestion. Put down the spear. Walk to the edge. Jump. A splash echoed through the mist. Shalas didn't even watch it sink. He turned his back, twirled his cane, adjusted his hat, and strolled toward the cabin. And just like that, he was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of brimstone and the memory of his dark smile. I've reported on daring rescues before, but this? This was art performance of such flair and grace that the crew of the Bergraam ferry will be telling tales of it for years. The ferry was in chaos, bullywugs swarming the deck. Passengers screamed as the slimy invaders launched spears through the thick mist. That's when Mercy stepped into the spotlight. Barefoot, adorned in loose silks and jewelry that jingled with each step, she danced across the deck. Her hands flashed, and 2 daggers appeared, as if conjured from thin air. The bullywug thrust its spear, and Mercy was gone, spinning in a blur of silk and shadow. The spear embedded itself into the deck, and Mercy reappeared behind the creature. With a flick of her wrist, the dagger slipped beneath the bullywug's ribs. The creature crumpled to the floor. 3 more bullywugs surrounded her, circling like predators, but Mercy stood calmly in the center, adjusting a silver ring on her finger. She raised a hand and whispered an incantation, and the air shimmered. One of the bullywugs clutched its head and began croaking violently, confused and stumbling. Vicious mockery. But just as the other 2 rushed toward her, Mercy stepped back, her footwork perfect. Isava's smile curled her lips as she spun into a low crouch. With a single twirl, she activated dazzling footwork, her daggers flashing as she slashed across both bullywugs in a single fluid motion. Blood splattered across the deck as the creature stumbled. She called out to the rest of the ferry, who wants an encore. So, dear readers, if you ever hear of a tiefling named Mercy, remember, she's not just a bard. She's a showstopper.